There's a new bombshell in Revolver News that picks up on a theme that was covered in an earlier story focusing on this guy named Ray Epps, who was prominently seen on video yelling for people to go into the Capitol on January 6th. Now, what makes all this really interesting is that Ray Epps has never been indicted. And yet, he is red-handed as an instigator, in fact, seemingly the primary instigator, directing people where to go and what to do. Now, this fact that they haven't gone after Ray Epps, even though he was originally on an FBI most wanted list, is strange. It's very odd. And by itself, it's just an anomaly. But what makes this new Revolver article so interesting is they broaden the argument, they broaden the evidence beyond Ray Epps, showing that there are other guys, very strikingly, who essentially enabled the Capitol breach. In fact, they took down barriers at the very logical point where the crowd would come from the Trump rally toward the Capitol, essentially saying, go in through here, this is the pathway in. And none of these guys, none of these key individuals have been indicted. Revolver News calls one guy scaffold commander. They have another guy methodically cutting down the fence, almost in a professional way. This is not some sort of activist who's shouting slogans. He doesn't have any Trump gear on. In fact, he's got dark sunglasses on. And it's like he's there to do a job. So these guys, it appears, are doing the FBI's bidding. They are, it seems, inside men. Now, the FBI hasn't acknowledged this. And of course, the left is like, there's no evidence the FBI was involved. Well, what do they mean by evidence? What they mean by evidence is that the FBI hasn't publicly admitted that they instigated January 6th. That's the only thing that for the left would constitute evidence. By contrast, people shouting, go in the Capitol, and other people cutting the fence, and a third guy standing on a booth tower basically directing people in, all these people unindicted. That's not evidence. Oh, nothing to see here, folks. That doesn't mean anything, Dinesh. So this is basically the state that we're in which evidence, real evidence, this is when you're trying to solve a mystery and you're pointing to facts on the scene captured on video and you're asking legitimate questions, you are interpreting empirical evidence, whether the left chooses to deny it or not. Now, I'll just give you a little glimpse of what's in the Revolver article. And I want to say that, this is why it's so important for our side to do investigative reporting. And there's so few people who do it. There's an awful lot of sort of conservative intellectual punditry. But I found even in my own work, the most effective work is stuff like my movie on Obama, which shows you a side of Obama that you hadn't seen before. And it's like, look, see for yourself. Wow, we had no idea. Or even the history of the Democratic Party. That's scholarly fact-finding, scholarly digging that shows that, listen, even after he signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Lyndon Johnson was still a raging bigot. So it makes no sense. The left's argument that he somehow changed his mind makes absolutely no sense in the view of the facts produced right here. Now, in the Revolver article, they show they're taking on the left's narrative, which is that basically the breach of the Capitol got going when the Proud Boys got there. This is the kind of, call it the New York Times version of the story. But, says Revolver, that's impossible. The Proud Boys didn't get to the monument, to the Peace Monument until 12:48 p.m., when the real breach occurred by Ray Epps and by the other guys around him, the guy on the tower, the so-called scaffold guy, when that occurred, the Proud Boys were still eating lunch and Trump was still speaking. So the timeline is really important here. The guys who enabled the breach were not the Proud Boys. They were a group of unidentified guys, well, unidentified with the exception of Epps, who is identified. And none of these people have been indicted by the FBI. This is what's so telling. Revolver calls them the breach team. And what you do is you see them not just taking down any barricades, they're taking down the exact barricades that make it possible for the crowd. Remember, a crowd is sort of like an animal without a kind of guiding intelligence. It's moving kind of aimlessly toward the Capitol. Now, had there been a breach in some side location, the crowd would never have found it. But the breach here was strategically calculated for the crowd to go in. It's almost as if, and this is the phrase from Revolver, this might have been, quote, the largest legal booby trap in American history. Now, the left might say, well, Dinesh, this is are you trying to peddle some sort of a conspiracy theory? Are you trying to sort of imply some sort of an inside job? First of all, the idea of a conspiracy is the left's own theory. I mean, the left says that January 6th was an inside job. So it's not as if the left claims that January 6th was a spontaneous action by a crowd, and the right is saying it's an inside job. Both sides are saying it's an inside job, and of course the disagreement is about who did the inside job. So from the left's point of view, this is sort of the Liz Cheney version of the story, which is the Pelosi version. It was Trump and the Trumpsters around him, and the January 6th commission is with like relentless, indefatigable sleuthing. You know, let's get Mark Meadows' text. Let's see if he was communicating with Louis Gohmert. So they're following their inside job theory. But what they're not doing, and I don't believe they're going to start doing, because this is too explosive for them to even touch. What about the inside job theory from the other side, which is that the FBI is the one? This is a question, it's not an answer, but I think the significance of the Revolver expose, and this is what good journalism does, is it raises powerful questions and provides supporting evidence that makes the questions legitimate and demands public answers. Now, concluding this article, Darren Beatty, the editor of Revolver, whom we've had on the podcast, realizes that he needs a smoking gun. He realizes that no matter how detailed your article, and this is a beautifully detailed article, I mean, it gives you almost a minute by minute, frame by frame, with video evidence for you to look for yourself and see. But at the end, Darren, I think, knows that he needs just one thing more. And what is it that he needs? Well, I'm just going to read his tweet. He says, as wrong as it is to work as an entrapment agent for the feds, many of these people are manipulated by their higher-ups. They're not told the full story, and all it takes now is one brave informant with a conscience and BALLS to take the story to the next level, expose your handler. So yes, what we need, and what Republicans, if they had any sense, would be looking for this, trying to bring out one of the FBI agents who was actively involved in instigating January 6th to go, you know what, this stinks. This is not the way a government should treat its own citizens. This was a trap set by the government, and I'm going to step forward and I'm going to spill the beans, and I'm going to go before Congress, and I'm going to go before the American people, and I'm going to tell them what we all want to know, what really happened.